Hey guys, welcome to this tutorial series where I plan on showing you how to create a digital image from pretty much zero. Yeah, this idea came about because I'm a long time digital artist and I've been teaching now at an art school in South Germany for like something like 20 plus semesters. So I repeated this course basically over and over again before I now finally want to record the process, not only for you but also for some of my students to have something that they can look up stuff, because it's kind of always with these things, it's very good to be able to ask stuff in person, but also there's a lot of stuff you just forget, right? So you can watch all the YouTube videos in the world, but at the end of the day, you need to apply that stuff yourself and have your own problems, and then look up those problems or have somebody help you with those problems. So this is what I'm trying to do here, starting right now. So I'm doing it in Photoshop, but of course you can pretty much do this nowadays in every other program, right? So it doesn't matter if you use Procreate or if you use Clip Studio. Those programs are all perfectly capable of doing almost all of the features, steps, tips and tricks that I am applying in Photoshop. So just feel free to use anything. The only difference is that you might need to look up some menu positions and some stuff may be named differently than it is in Photoshop, so just be aware of that. So yeah, why should you listen to me? I don't know. As I said, I've been teaching this stuff for some years now. I personally came into this space in 2005. I was in art school in southern Germany, and I bought the first Wacom tablet, and it was into 3, and pretty much nobody at this point had any idea what to do with it. So I was the only one at art school who had it. I was terrible at using it, and nobody could help me explain how to do stuff. Of course, there was everything back then. It was Photoshop, there was Creative Suite, but it was not common that you would, over here in Europe, that you would do digital painting like that. So fast forward pretty much 20 years, here we are. I'm sure there's lots of stuff already on YouTube. I'm not watching or following any YouTube artists, so I wouldn't know exactly. And it's also not relevant to me, because what I want to show you is my approach that I developed with my students, and for myself, of course, is what made sense to me throughout the years. And as I said before, in the beginning, I had to teach myself, and I had to make all the mistakes that you can possibly make in Photoshop or in digital illustration as a whole. So yeah, hope you will enjoy this, and let's start right away. All right, so here we are in Photoshop, and as I said before, I want to do this from zero, and I think most people don't do this from zero. And from my understanding, also a lot of students, a lot of starters in this space, they don't know a lot about the environment. So as you can see, I scanned my image that I basically is a hand sketch, and just scanned it, put it in here in Photoshop. And I'm not saying that you have to do this, but I mean, there is a process that you are capturing your idea with. Whether that's a hand sketch or that is something else. You can also sketch digitally, of course. You could sketch this on your iPad on Procreate, and then just transfer it, export it to a PSD file, and then get it into the program of your choice somehow. So these first few steps are not so relevant if you did it digitally, because the first thing that we need to do is clean up the image, right? So any scan of any pencil sketch will pretty much look like somewhat like this in the beginning, which is fairly low contrast, and then you can see a lot of the paper, a lot of maybe some grain, maybe the background is not all white. So first thing is that we basically prepare this sketch to work with it. So what I want to do always is to have an idea of what I'm looking at. So as you may be aware of, that a lot of monitors, you cannot really differentiate white or let's say bright tones. At a certain point you're not sure whether you are looking at white or at black, or if it's just off by some measurements. So therefore I have the info here, and you can get the info over here by hitting F8 on the keyboard, or just bringing up this window. I put this down here because it doesn't bother me there, and I can always look at it. So when I now hover over the image, I can see some readings. So now, for example, it says for my RGB values is something like 255 in all channels. And that pretty much means I have perfect white there, because 255 RGB on all channels is the highest that you can get. And since it's like a light color addition thing, that means that if all channels are full blast, then you get white. So what I want, and you can see that if I hover, this reading varies. So I don't have perfect white everywhere, and you can also clearly see this. There's a structure of the paper. So the first thing I want to do is I want to get the structure out, stuff that bothers me, clean up the sketch a little bit, and then have my lines be more visible. So, but even before that, there's two more things I want to check. So first, you can see down here, we have a color profile. And this is basically a color space that comes from the scanner. In my case, it's an Epson scanner. So it will just have an untagged RGB profile. What does that mean? That means that if you imagine like the gamut triangle, where all the colors fall in, that means that this is not really very defined. So what you want to do is give it a profile. And this, you can do it right here. You can assign a profile or convert to a profile. And since we're starting out, I just want to convert this into a profile. And the profile of my choice, usually with these digital pieces, is sRGB. Reason for this is more than one reason. First, you're maybe not sure what to do with this image later, but you are sure that you want to put it on the internet. So the color space of the internet is sRGB. It's like the most common color space that you can find digitally on your phone, on Instagram, on pretty much everywhere. So if what you see is good in sRGB, then most likely will suffice for pretty much anything else. Now, it might be the case that you want to print it later, in which case you might be tempted to select a CMYK. However, problem with that is that CMYK color space is much smaller than the sRGB color space. So there's a lot of colors that you will just not be available to you if you select the CMYK color space. Therefore, I would also always recommend using something like sRGB. Now, could you select a higher color space like Adobe RGB or like a REC? Yes, you could, but keep in mind that if you select Adobe RGB and you have even a monitor that can show it, which is another problem to have, then what will happen is maybe you choose a very saturated and nice color, and maybe you make the image very poppy, and then once you convert it and put it on the internet, on Instagram, on ArtStation, doesn't matter where, then you can no longer see those colors because it will automatically convert the color space into sRGB. So that there's another problem for you. Too high fidelity is not always good. So for now, stick with sRGB. Also, there's a high chance that most monitors, they can do near a perfect sRGB display, but they cannot so much do any higher ones because you need a much more expensive monitor for this. And also, they mostly cannot proof in CMYK either, so it's your best off with sRGB. Right, very long talk for this. So once you did this, it shows up down here, and you are sure that you're in a normal color space. So the other thing that we need to do is, of course, to rotate the image. So rotating the image, you can do this in different ways. You can just rotate the entire image, but then, yeah, this is, I would recommend just doing this about right, and then we're fixing the image, and then we're finalizing aspect ratio and composition. So first, let's make this much more visible. One little thing is that I advise everybody to do with a black and white sketch is to desaturate the image, because a lot of times there's color in there that you don't even realize is in there. For example, I'm hovering over here and you can see the reading says 252, 252, 250. So right away that tells me there is some color, because in RGB space, only if you have the same reading on all channels, you will have a perfect neutral gray. And in all other cases where one value is higher than the other values, you will have, it will lean towards a color. So there is color in there, even though you might not be able to perceive it right now. So then a lot of times when you push desaturate, see how it slightly shifted colors. So now it's neutral, and now we're sure that it's neutral, and everywhere I hover, I get the RGB readings of all three channels the same, right? 246 all channels. Can always look down here for this. 247 all channels. So yeah, next we bring up the levels. The levels now show us something. You might have seen this and not know what it is. So quick explanation. These levels show us tone-wise where there is something going on the canvas and where there is not. So in my case, since everything is very bright, there's only something going on in the upper 20% tonally from white to black. And then down here, there's almost nothing. So that means it's a very poorly balanced image. So what we want to do is to modify basically this graph. So we have a huge spike here, and the huge spike is most stuff on the image has that color, right? So most stuff now is near white. So therefore, if I tune this down, you will see how it will eat away on the image. So I want to use this to my advantage also, because you can see the grain starts disappearing once I tune this down. And then, but I need to counter it with something, because I cannot have it eat away all of my image. So I have to elevate the lows, and you can see how this brings up the entire sketch. So now also the grain is more visible, but now I can differentiate a little bit more. So I will bring this slowly down until it's fairly clean, but I can still see the lines. And if you want to compare, you can just tick the preview box. So what I want here is I don't want the all black sketch, because I'm about to do a digital painting, and this is just my idea sketch. I will not even probably have any of that in the final image. So that does not concern me. What concerns me is that I can see it and I can work underneath it. So yeah, I will bring it up to about this level. I think that's good enough. And then also in here, even without applying this, you can already hover, and then down here you will see two values. You will see the legacy value before the change, and you will see the new value after the change. So you can see, for example, if you achieved in making the canvas perfect white. So in this case, before it was 254, which was almost there, but now the new value on the right is 255, which is perfect. So once I'm satisfied with how this turned out, I'm gonna hit OK, and now this will be my image. So next thing is, now contrast wise, this is readable. But now if I want to clean it further, I cannot do it on the background, because the background will not let me. Well, technically I could just paint white, but I want to have more control than this. So what I always recommend, also you will see that in the process later, we absolutely need this. Duplicate this layer and have it no longer be the background layer. So then what I do is I inject the new white layer in between, just to make sure I have perfect white underneath. We'll combine this to be the background, and then now I can clean this up. And what I mean by that is, first you might get rid of everything that is not like was not intended, or is just dirt or grain. So you could use any brush for this. Most likely your brushes will look somewhat, there is the standard brush library, which will have round brushes in it. I use hard rounds. So for example, this is a brush that is just round, does not really apply any pressure, but that way I'm sure that I get 100% of opacity. So the same goes the other way around. If I use this brush as an eraser, I can just erase out 100% of stuff. You want the soft eraser, you can use a soft round, and then that way you will be able to do like more smooth transitions basically. But that's not really what I'm looking for here. I just want, for example, those lines that were purely for the sketch to disappear. I want to understand what I meant, but I don't want to have lines that bother me. So the other stuff that you can do is you can just mark an area like so, and then just hit backspace and delete that area. What that will do is it will create holes, like erasing from the layer will, but since you have white underneath, this does not concern you. What you can also do instead is just have a brush, a positive brush, and just paint white over it. So that will visually have the same effect, but of course, in reality, if you paint white on this layer, it will add white to it. It will not create holes in your layer. But relax, because in a second I will show you why this is completely irrelevant. It's just whatever you prefer at this point. So now, if the thing is fairly clean, and I might change some stuff in terms of composition, and it also doesn't matter for it to be perfect. So do not zoom in there and now try to clean up these lines to make every line perfect. It's a complete waste of time, because this is just your game plan. This is just your sketch. You're not, most likely not going to use this, and even if you are, the imperfections look better than if you were to make it perfect. So yeah, there is doing a little bit of more erasing, just the stuff that is really irritating and that does not belong, so that I don't get later the idea that, oh yeah, there was, what did I mean by that, right? That's always the thing, because later this is about making decisions, and then you have to remember what was your intention when you did the sketch. So now this is good enough for me. Obviously you can see, and if you go over to my Instagram, you will see that I'm doing lots of in my free time, I'm doing lots of science fiction scenes. I like architecture and I like industrial design, so combining them is kind of my thing. Rarely do characters. I put humans in the scenes, but this is now more about basically painting a scene. So in order for you to paint a scene, you have to pretty much be able to paint anything, right? So this is really more the painterly approach. It's not vehicle design, is also not a character design, it's a scenic painting. But those principles that I'm about to show you, you can apply it pretty much for every kind of subject. So next is that the image might still not be the perfect orientation and aspect ratio and the perfect frame. So this is what we're doing next. If you get the rulers, you can pretty much check for your horizon or for any other lines whether they're straight or not. So next thing I'm doing is, I think this needs a little bit of a turn, and you can also, because you can see that it kind of bends a little bit, maybe that is due to the paper, or maybe I just drew it sloppily. So that's all of that is possible. So now let's see if I rotate it, if I get anywhere with this. So almost these lines start to bend too much. So I think that was pretty much okay. But then we'll see if I can get somewhere with distortion. So distortion, you can also correct some stuff, as you can see. But there's a high chance that this is the best I will get. I kind of like this to be, yeah. It's going out slightly, right? For the angle, looking up, that is pretty much, yeah, not what you expect, but it's very slight, and we can correct this in the final when we do the blocking of the shapes and the grayscale. So yeah, this is just for it about to be straight, and the only thing that puts me off of this straightness now is this line, because this is the end. It was supposed to be the end of the water line, so this is kind of crooked, so I need to correct this. Anyways, once we're fine with this, I hit OK, and now I'm getting rid of those lines, and I'm also getting rid of the ruler, because that's just I like it as clean as possible. So then I need to really set the frame, which means I do away with everything that is not in the frame. So all the additional white space that got created by the scan, I'm getting rid of it right now. So this, I wanted to have some sort of a sky. I don't want it to be too condensed over there, because it needs some, the ship is supposed to look huge, so it needs some space around it. Also, be aware that there is always a composition thing going on. So you go from, basically this is more of a diagonal composition, but that's another story. That's for you to decide in your own piece. It's whatever you want. So maybe in another video we talk about creating the sketch. That is also very interesting. Anyways, so we are pretty much able to start. There's one thing that I forgot that I want to look up quickly, and that is crucial if you're not already having a good workflow with your scan, and maybe you made an image from your phone for this sketch and you're not sure about the resolution, but we have to check the resolution. So if you come in here, we just check image size. So it will, this might be by default be something else than pixels. So if it is, I want you to choose pixels and then look at the clean amount of pixels that you have. So in my case, I have 6,000 something by 4,400, This is plenty of pixels. This is fine. All for years, as a rule of thumb, I've been giving out a number of around 12 megapixels, which would equal 4000 by 3000. If you have around this, you're okay. It's better to have a little bit more, especially if you plan on printing it later. For the web, this is all fine, because usually you will not have more than a 4K monitor resolution, and this covers that like threefold. So there's no problem here. Also, maybe in another video I'll explain this, but the DPI does not matter now, which is why we're looking at pure pixels. So these pixels, you can correct it to an even number, but it's not even, it doesn't even matter. So if you have a low count here, what you do is you just type in a new number like I did, and it will calculate, given you have this relation activated, it will just calculate the other amount of pixels accordingly. So for example, if it says 1200, you just type in 4000 on the longer side, and it will give you the equivalent for the other side. So once you made sure that you have enough pixels, because that is something that is a shame. You work, and in the end you might realize, oh shit, I have very low resolution on this image, and I cannot even print it on A4 or something like that. So that's a real waste of your effort there. So make sure that this is a nice pixel count. And you can also see this from the zoom factor of your monitor. Right now we're zoomed in 25%, which shows me that really the picture is 4 times more in pixel scale, which is of course an indicator that it is high enough. Okay, so now next step pretty much in this first part of the tutorial will be doing grayscale layering underneath this sketch. So there's now, we're at the point where there's more than one approach, and some artists, they will do, some artists will not do a sketch, they will just start out in color, but that is a lot more difficult. From what I've seen with students over the years, people are not so comfortable with this, because then really everything needs to come from your imagination in the instance where you put down the shapes and the color, and that is very hard to do. So I'm not recommending you do this. I'm recommending instead you have kind of a sketch. It can be a rough sketch. As you can see, this is not the most perfect sketch. I did this, maybe it took me an hour to do this sketch or something, and while I did the sketch I think about the composition, and you look up maybe some buildings that you like, you look up some shapes, some vehicles that you like, and maybe even some color compositions on photographs that you like. All of that is fine. If you have a reference, you can also put it in Photoshop right here in the file to be able to look up stuff. So, but what we also want, and what is usually what I teach, so I teach designers, so that means people who do this as a profession, they don't want to just copy an image, like not go on Google, get an image and do the exact same image, because in the industry this has no purpose. You're just doing something that already exists. So what you want is, you want something new, you want a transformation of some sort into something new. So what I did here is I saw an image of northern Italy buildings, and I thought, oh, this is nice, let me just do some buildings like these buildings in roughly the same style, and then insert a spaceship and a valley and some mountains and then a reflection on the sea. So yeah, that is how you should think about your image, doing something new, some design work on it, because otherwise it just will be completely irrelevant. So let me quickly change this line. So you can also, of course, if you have a nice brush to do this, you can still paint in this, you can still make new lines, and make adjustments to your sketch. Now you can see that this does not integrate too well. It is first because it's too dark, and then also it's too thick of a stroke. So this is much better. See, now you can almost not differentiate it. So if you want to make changes, you can also, of course, make them on a separate layer. So for example, I could just draw a horizon line or a water line in here, and then pretty much erase what I don't want from this line. So now I have this, and now with this straight line, you can see that you understand it much better. Maybe I put some more straight lines here just as a reference, so that I don't forget what actually is straight in this image. Because sometimes on paper, like, the straightness is the thing that you don't get it immediately right. So let's see over here. Yeah, this is pretty good. Right, so doing some lines also to test if this is straight. This line, yeah, it's pretty much okay. So once I'm satisfied with this sketch, which I will go no further on this, we can start blocking in some tones. So as I said before, it's very hard to start out with no sketch and in color right away, which is why I always teach to start out in grayscale and then inject color later. But that will come on part 2 of this tutorial. So once there's my changes, I combine these layers again, and I really only need one layer for that sketch. Of course, if you want, you can cut out the object of desire. You could even, let's do this quickly just to show you. You could even cut out an object and move it around. However, you need to be very aware of the perspective issues that this can create. So if I was to cut out this ship, now I can move it around. But if I move it somewhere where perspective does not allow me to do, it does not integrate and it doesn't look right. So I cannot move it too much, right? So maybe, let's see, go back here. Of course, I did this sketch very purposefully, and I have experience. So this is not a coincidence that the ship sits where it sits, right? So maybe I want it a little bit higher, and maybe I want it just there. So let's say I change it slightly to this new position. Once I like this change, I will also then immediately combine those sketches again. So yeah, I'll keep the initial thing. So then once you change stuff, you could, well, let's see how this looks. This is much more interesting to me. Changing the little ship. So this could be good. This could create more of a diagonal dynamic. Maybe I like this more. Yeah, I think I do. So sometimes you can also, yeah, as you can see, try out positioning. And then once you like what you see, you just merge those layers again. Of course, be aware that there's an inherent trap in Photoshop, which is you can always change everything unlimited times. So at one point you need to commit to something. So this is a big lesson that is in here, because a lot of people don't succeed in art because they're unable to make decisions. Because really what it is, and what I also want to show you in the tutorial, is that it's not so much about the skill of handling the brush and being a genius with the details. It is much more about you being able to make good overall decisions, right? So now we need some layers. So we'll have a certain layer arrangement in here, and this layer arrangement will be logical to reflect the content. That means that now the layer that is in the background is my sky. And then the next layer that is in front of that will be the mountains that are in front of the sky. And then the next layer, you guessed it, are those buildings and the lake that is in front of those mountains, and so on, right? So you want a layer order, in my opinion, that makes some sense. There is other approaches. If you watch like Sparth, he just does whatever, right? He just spams layers. But that is something that not everybody can do. Just because you have a genius guy that does it doesn't mean that it's the best idea for everybody, right? So in my opinion, it's not. In my opinion, it's much better if you start this out, that you do something that you can understand it, and that you have a method to it. And then later, if you know all the tricks in the book, then you can completely shit on all the methods. That's fine. But for now, to learn it, it's much better to have a method. So what I'm doing is I am grayscaling now this sketch. So my sky will be gray. So now I run into the first major issue that a lot of people before ran into, and that is, my sketch, including the white, is covering up now the gray that I paint underneath it. So if you look at the layer order, the sketch is on top. And that is crucial because I want to see the sketch at all times. But of course, it doesn't work if the white from the sketch blocks out all the other grayscales. Or for that matter, everything underneath it. So what we need to do is change layer blending of the style and change this to multiply. And once you did this, what it does with it, it will have this layer ignore white and just project the darker tones over all the other layers that are underneath. So this way you can draw every single tone underneath. You will always be able to see the lines from the sketch. It's the oldest trick of colorizing sketches in Photoshop. This exists since Photoshop 7, like in 98 or something. I used this trick already back then when I was a teenager. So yeah, this is really one of the oldest tricks. Multiply layers. There used to be much less layer effects than this. And one of the first ones to be was multiply, and then the lighten, I guess, which is pretty much the opposite of that. All right, select multiply only for the sketch. This is an effect that is very useful, but since there is now a lot of other layer effects, you don't really need it for anything else anymore, but more on that later. So now that we have that, there's the sky, and then immediately I'm putting the next layer. And now there's different methods as to put the next layer. So what you might think is, now what colors are the mountains? Doesn't matter. Later. Now what matters is, are the mountains darker or brighter than the sky? And the answer to that is they are darker. So select any tone that is darker than the sky, and then start painting your mountains or whatever there is in front of the background layer. So I could just paint this and that would work, but then I have to deal with the round brush and I cannot make so hard edges and stuff like this. So no matter what you use, most important thing is that you use a brush now that is 100% opacity. So I don't use anything that reacts to pressure right now, because what I want to be sure that what I paint is not transparent, okay? And this is very crucial, because if you paint a transparent mountain or a transparent building and later you change something in the background, that change will shine through everything and you will be in trouble. So just treat any solid objects as really solid objects, also layer wise and tone wise. So you select a brush that is just covering 100% opacity, and then be sure that you're not tuning down opacity manually either, because if I do this, let's do it just to show you. Now this looks fine, but once I get rid of the background, you will see that this is transparent and this is not transparent. So getting the transparent thing might look fine for a while, but it will get you in trouble, so don't do it. Back to cranking this up to 100. and I will just continue painting. So the other method, which I use it much more in the beginning, is to select stuff with the lasso. And you can see that there is a very immediate advantage to that, which is that I can make small insertions and I can keep to the sketch much better with this lasso tool than I would be able to with a big round brush, right? So also you can add to this selection by just hitting Shift, or subtract from the selection by hitting Alt. So it's really easy to just select everything you need just via the lasso tool. So yeah, let me do this for a second. Right, so I don't need to select everything technically, but it also doesn't hurt. So yeah, I could just do everything down here, but I'm sure there will be, the water maybe will be a separate layer, maybe not, but this is more of an individual decision. So now I could just paint bucket this. I could also paint it with a huge brush, because now I have the selection and I cannot go outside of the selection. Whatever you prefer, you do, but make sure that this is 100% covering up everything else. So now that I have that, you can see that what I did is basically a mountainscape, a silhouette of a mountainscape. So we have a bright gray for the sky, and then we have a darker gray for the mountain in front. So, and then I need, the next thing is all these structures, and they get a darker tone on a new layer that is in front of the other layers. The further down the layer is, the more in the back. You can think of this like a diorama, which layers, and it starts with a background, and then overlapping are all these other layers. So now, next layer, I'm not zooming in either. You might have realized that. And I'm not being perfect here. I'm just doing this thing about right. There's a lot of people who are obsessing with detail, and they want to zoom in at all times, but let me tell you, it's not a good idea, because what you want to do is really have an overview of what you're doing, and not all the details are important, right? Because creating a painting is not creating a 3D model that needs to have all of the leaves of all of the trees. It's more of creating an illusion, and that will integrate at some point if you're doing, if you're making good decisions. So now there's certain things I could do here. Not sure how this was meant to be. And in that case, I will just select the whole thing. Now this will take a little bit of time, of course, so bear with me for a second. Yeah, I thought of doing this not real time and just speeding up the process, but then again, you can do that yourself. And if you're really interested in how I'm doing it exactly, then I will leave this, just the same speed for you. Some of the structures I don't even know. I already forgot what I meant. This is something that happens a lot, but it's not the end of the world. You will find new purpose, and you will maybe remember what you wanted to express with those structures. So, yeah, for example, this here is overlapping. And then you can add to this selection however many times you want to. So even if I was just to decide, oh, now it's time to paint them, maybe even a little bit darker. So even if I lose the selection, I can still continue this process, making new selections and then painting those new selections. So I'm not really losing anything. So no need to worry about saving a selection or something. Also, if you have 100% opacity of any layer and you just hit control the layer, you get your selection back. Ooh, yeah, I know. If you don't know this, it's always mind-blowing, but that's just the nature of it. It will just look for tones with 100% opacity and just select all the tones in the layer, and then you have your selection back. So really no need to worry about this at this point. And this is also something I really want to drive home throughout the entire tutorial, is that people worry about the wrong stuff a lot of times. They want to be perfect. They want to make everything. They don't want to lose things, lose the progress, destroy anything they made. When really in Photoshop there's so many tricks that you can prevent this from happening, that it's not necessary to worry too much. You just have to know how to prevent it, and I will show you countless methods of this. So now let's speed this a little bit. So everywhere where there is a more complicated stuff going on, I'm trying to be a little bit more accurate, because where it's silhouettes against the background is really where it will make or break the image, let's say. Also, don't worry if you cannot make a perfect sketch. This is a learning process, right? You don't need to be perfect to do this. But with the right process, you will make much more. You will progress much faster. The worst thing is not being sure if the process that you're doing is actually the right process. And I know, because as I said it in the intro, for years I was trying to teach myself with some forums when there was even no YouTube around, and it's really hard. You're constantly questioning whether you're doing the right approach at all, right? So that's not good. It's not a very comfortable place to be in. But once you know that you're on the right track, then you can focus on the content much more. So this stuff will turn out to be a little bit crooked, but it doesn't matter, because the stuff that really needs to be super straight and super perfect, I will fix it later. And this is something that in terms of the shape of those layers, you can always come back and fix them later. So that's also something to note, that no, you absolutely do not need to zoom in and make this perfect right now. Make this perfect, because one, there is no perfect, and then second, it's just a waste of time. So I'm not zooming in. I want to see the entire image at all times now. So this was supposed to be some kind of a tree, I guess. So I just want this to manifest fast as possible, but also not so fast that I am missing details. So I want an efficient process. And forgive me if I sound a little bit too much like a teacher or anything, but at the end of the day, I don't care for this stuff. I want to have fun while painting. And I'm showing you this process also because I believe that the only way for you to ever be good is if you don't have to care about all this like tedious shit, all the menu stuff. You make it easy for yourself and you make it enjoyable, and then you will do something great. That's just how I feel about it. And all of this, we just learn it so that we don't need to worry about it, right? Because at the end of the day, this is a freaking computer, and it's much more complicated than painting on paper. And making it even more complicated for yourself, it doesn't help. So we want to make it as intuitive and as simple as possible. That has always been my goal, and that's also what I'm telling people. Because what you don't want is click the menu, search the menu, then do something, and then I need the next menu, I need to search for the next menu, and then search here, what was this, and then search all the menus. And half the time you're not even painting, you're just searching menus, and this is not what you want. What you want is, you want some hotkeys and then know where everything is. That's why I laid out this sidebar like this. I will maybe talk about this in the beginning of the next part of the tutorial, so that I don't have to do it. I just have everything that I need at my disposal, and I don't need to browse through menus and waste time like that. So now, I think this was a rock. Well, almost there. You can also make little additions to the sketch if you feel like it. If you're having a creative moment and you say, there needs to be an antenna here. See, I can just paint it in, because later when I fill it, it will appear and then it will be in the image. So that's also something. Drawing with the lasso tool is a very, very nice little trick. Also, a lot of pros use this because it just makes you very fast. And the lasso, you can really view it almost like a pencil. You will see in a minute how this will turn out when I add the tones. Kind of like these half-rounded trees. That's what did strike me immediately in a photo that I looked at before. So I wanted these trees to be in here, but that's just a lot of personal preference stuff. Right, so over here, I did not paint too many reflections. Now I can see there are definitely some reflections missing from this scene. But yeah, we'll see about that. We make it just a little bit better. So in this tutorial, I'm doing really an approach of doing everything in a logical order. Of course, I could have started painting the mountains now, but I will quickly explain to you why it doesn't make so much sense. Because when you paint the mountains, you have to judge what you paint by the other content. But if the other content has not appeared yet, there's nothing for you to judge it by. So inevitably you will make decisions that once the other stuff is there, you have to overthink them again and maybe change them again. So I will always do what a lot of art books also recommend, which is to develop the piece as a whole at the same time as much as possible. Another little tower. Let's see. There's a tree missing. Right, so okay, looking good over here. So now there should be some holes in here. You can look through this on the water surface. This doesn't have to be perfect, but now another trick I will show you in 1 second. See how I already painted these? But here's where the selection is very powerful, because now you can invert the selection very quickly, hit backspace, they disappear. Why? Because now I select everything else, and now I invert it again, basically, and I'm back on my selection, right? So when you hover over it, you will see the cursor will indicate whether this is the actual selection or this is the not selected part. So this is the not selected, and this is the selected, and you can see this because you can move it around. Be sure to not, leave it like that though. So here I will cut away a little bit more. I think you can see through here, would be nice, just a little bit. And yeah, that's it, I think. So now it's the fun part, make it appear. See what we have done. Now, again, can deselect this. See what we have done is we have silhouetted now this, and this should also already look like something pleasing. Now, I don't know why there is a gap. Sometimes there is stuff that escapes you, but now you realize here. So you can see through here, it's fine. So yeah, this more or less works for me. So it reflects the sketch, but of course all the stuff inside we have to model it later. So now on to the next one. Let's bring the water surface quickly. Water, I bring it in front of the mountain. So sometimes it is really as simple as just making a rectangular shape and then just giving it a tone. So the tone for the mountain is this tone. Tone for the sky is a little bit brighter. I give it something in between. Let's see how that looks. So I just want now it to be perceivable that this is something else, right? Of course, in reality, the tones of the water in the background, they oftentimes mix so that you cannot even tell. But for now, to organize these layers, I want this, so I want there to be a difference. So yeah, water in front of the mountains, buildings in front of everything else. Now, next thing that is in front of that. Now there's the thing. Technically, this spaceship is not in front, it's in the back. So I would have to put it behind those buildings. So, but I can, of course, change this at any time. So for now, we'll keep it like that. So whatever this object is now, the main object of your image, or maybe there is none, maybe it's just a landscape, it could be, maybe it's architecture, maybe it's a coffee machine, right? It doesn't really matter. The same thing, a painting that shows a coffee machine on a kitchen counter, you can do it the exact same way I'm doing this now. There's no difference. It's just then the wall will be the sky, and then the kitchen counter will be your buildings, and then your coffee machine that resides on that will be your spaceship. You have to think about it like that. It's really always the same thing. What overlaps what is in front of something else, and then you order you make a layer order that is logical and reflects that. So yeah, almost done here with the, I would say it's a rather organic shape. It's almost like a fish spaceship. Oh, that's too long. Is it? Let's see. Measure like a distance from here to here, then that's the body is from here to here. Yeah, that's probably too long. So yeah, I'll leave it at that. So adjustments like that, you can always make them. The sketch is your idea. It is a set of decisions that you made in advance, and now you're adhering to most of them, but you don't need to adhere to all of them. That means you can still change stuff. Of course, if you're changing too much, then maybe it's not justified, because you would then better go back to do an entire different sketch with a different idea and then come back and do this process. So you have to commit to your idea at one point. So I would say the moment that you have a sketch on paper or digitally and you decide, I want to make a full painting from this is the time that you commit. And once it's in there, you're not changing everything, because if you were to change everything, then it makes no sense that you even decided to do this sketch in the first place, if you think about it like that, right? So even though you can always change everything in Photoshop, it doesn't mean you should, because that is not a matter of Photoshop, that is a matter of the creative process. If you're always questioning everything, then you will never have an image, okay? So that's just a side note here. Some more fishy spaceships. So the idea here is that the small ship resembles the big ship in a way, but is still slightly different for it to be interesting. So maybe that's a ship that goes back to the mothership, something like that. Now, we need to make another decision, that is, what is the tone for those ships? And the short answer is, doesn't matter. It needs to be different than all the other stuff for us to make a distinction. So now it has a tone, and now basically what I am at a point where I have everything that I want colored with just one gray tone. So now what I can do is I can think about contrast. So I can, for example, go in here and then just modify the brightness of this ship. So do I want it to be bright? I kind of do. It will be, I don't want it to be a dark color. I want it to be maybe a reflective metal material, which means is that it will kind of take the color from its surroundings and absorb those colors. So I cannot make it too different. Obviously, if I make it too dark, it looks like an entire different color, right? It looks like it's a dark color or paint job. So I don't want that. So for now, leave it a little bit more bright, and then I will go back to those structures and make them just a little bit darker on average, because I figured that all the shadows inside and all the plants, trees are usually a little bit darker. So I'm going for this approach, and then in the next step, there's also the water. again, and those mountains, you can also modify those slightly. So you see that they cannot be the same as the ship, because then you lose depth, right? And you need a little bit of a atmospheric perspective, as they say in English. But what it really means is that if you go back, you lose contrast. So the further you are away, the more everything looks the same. So that is very crucial to understand for your decision making, is that you have more contrast in front, you have less contrast in the back, always, pretty much. So now I'm choosing this to silhouette from the sky, but also this gray be in the middle, so that the ship and the buildings can silhouette nicely from it, right? So there is enough of a difference. It was like this. I made it a little bit darker. Maybe we'll do it like this. So yeah, this is not the be all end all. This is, as you can see, the simpler it is, the more easy you can change it. The more complicated it gets, the less you can change it. So now I'm focusing on getting this foundation really right, so that in the next step I can do something even better. So the final step in this part of the tutorial, which is only part 1, is that we do another pass of grayscale on every of these layers. And then we have, what that means is that we now, before I put a second gray on any of these layers, I have to decide where the light is coming from, right? Because now it doesn't matter, because it's all the same. But the second I decide for a second tone, I need to ask myself, which side of a building, of a structure, is brighter than the other side? And the answer to that is automatically, you need to answer the question, where is the light coming from? So for this, I'll show you a little bit of what you can do to figure that out. So now I'll make this very, very simple. You create a new layer and you ask yourself, where is the horizon? And this question you should already know, because you should have asked yourself that doing the sketch. So in my case, this is where the lake ends, or where the water ends. But of course, water would go further beyond the mountain, which means that is not the horizon, because the world does not end where the lake ends, okay? So horizon has to be higher than that. So horizon is somewhere here, I guess. You can move it around and you can see maybe it's just a little bit higher. That will also work, right? So in my case, I think that's pretty good, because as you move further away, difference, like it's not so much of a difference. So I could not possibly make the horizon here, because you can already see from how I paint the buildings, like I move them perspectively, I move them down here. So this line needs to end on the horizon, right? Else this painting is wrong. They need to end on the horizon. They can only do so if the horizon is lower than that. Therefore, horizon cannot be up there. It needs to be in between here and here, somewhere here. So I'm putting it here. And this is a decision. Once you decide this, you have to stick to it. You can never ever change that, because everything depends on that. So now, maybe I want the light to come from, or in my case, I know what I want. I want the light to come from here somehow. So that means that it will automatically put shadow on this side of every structure, right? It would automatically put shadow on all of these sides of the structures, and it leave illuminated all of the other sides of the structure. So this side will be darker than this side. Same for here. It will go somewhat like this. So what I do is I remind myself underneath here there will be no light. Underneath here there will be probably no light. So yeah, that's already kind of a mistake. So you see what I'm doing here is I'm thinking about where there will be a shadow underneath here, and then it will cast a shadow like so underneath here. It will also cast a shadow. So underneath the tree already in the sketch there will be a shadow, and then so I'm just marking shadow areas. And you might not need this, but this is a good reminder. So there's another problem with that. And that is you can see that I marked now these shadow areas automatically, pretty much assuming that the light is coming from the back. But it could be coming from the front. From this arrow alone, you cannot tell. You need more than that to be able to tell, and I'm showing you a neat trick on how to do this. So you have your horizon, right? And then somewhere there's a light source. In this case, the light source is outside of the frame by like a lot, because it's the sun, and if the sun is not in the frame, then it's pretty much outside and very far away. So what I need now is I need to a reminder of the direction of the light, because this is only a direction, but you cannot see if it's coming from the front or not. Because example, it could be coming from the front, so shining onto the scene, right, like so. So this would be the direction of the light. And then the second direction that you need is this direction. So if it would come from the front, now you see if there was a light source here, it would be pretty much here, hovering over the water, right? And then it would shine like so, and it would shine towards this direction and towards this like infinite middle point. So of course it can also be the other way around. So from here we could say that, because I want it to shine from the back, so we have to do this differently. What we have to do is we have to basically say it is shining from here. It was shining towards this point from the front. Now it's shining from the back. If it's shining from the back, it's pretty much shining from the horizon point. And then the question is, where does it shine to? And then the answer can be it's coming from this direction, just over the horizon, and then here is the sun, and the sun shines, and now you see how this shadow makes sense according to the sun. Maybe the sun needs to be a little bit higher. I don't want it to be in the frame, so therefore it will be outside of the frame by my own definition, by my decision. So, but this can be the direction, and the direction will make sense because it will cast a shadow like so. It will illuminate this side of a building, but leave the other side with much less light. And then the side of the building that you cannot even see, which would be like this side of this, in this side of the building, that would be the darkest side. That would be the third side where there's the least light. Okay, so now that means I don't want the sun in here, but I want this light direction. So therefore, sun is up there somewhere, right? And then it shines down in an angle, and this is the angle. There is an angle of the light coming down because sun is up. And then what that means is, translated from the horizon, I have a direction of light that goes like this. And this now hits every corner, and it creates a shadow on all of these structures. And then once you set this rule, you have to adhere to this rule at all times. You cannot change this again, because that would mean now an inconsistency. Once you decided for this, you have to stick with it. So I will stay with this. And this just to remind you, it's not perfect math. You don't need to measure this and get all fancy about it. It just needs to be about right. That is your rule, and you adhere to this rule. You respect this rule 90%. Like not to be perfect, but just be aware that this is what you're dealing with. So there's light here, and then there's no light down here. Is what no light here, no light here. And then the shadow of this tree comes from this direction, and then it will project somewhat like this. That's what I want to know. And then this building, it will project something like this, and then the higher part of the building will do this, and maybe it will be somewhat like this. So, and then from here to here you have this wall, and you will project the shadow of this decision will look somewhat like this, and there's nothing you can do about it. If you want it to change, then you need to make a different decision about the light. So you cannot just go, I put shadows where I want, and then be surprised later that it doesn't make sense. You need to first decide for the light source and then stick to that decision. It's like in a 3D program, you would put a light globe there, and then you would hit render, and it will illuminate the scene for you, and you will see what you get, and you cannot change it unless you change that light source. And it's pretty much the same here. The only difference is that we can cheat a little bit because it's art, it's not a 3D program, right? But we need this basic rule to make the scene look believable. So that is my game plan for the light. And you can draw shadows to remind yourself, oh, there will be shadows here. If it helps you, it's a good idea because you can do it fast. And then I just keep this layer. And if I forget, oh, what was the plan again for the light? I switch on this layer and okay, that was the direction. Okay, makes sense now. So this shadow needs to be like this. And then yeah, there's a shadow underneath here, and it's very steep direction. So yeah, this shadow is longer, right? So all of that stuff, I can just remind myself, oh yeah, there's a shadow down here because it comes from here and it hits here, right? And so on and so forth. So this decision you need to make. There's no way around this. You're not progressing in a manner that is going to be good if you're not aware of what you're doing. Okay, so now I can keep this and then do my shadow pass. So I'm going back to all of these layers, and all of these layers I'm giving them a second tone. So in terms of the sky, yeah, I know pretty much that the sky, it gets brighter down there. So I will just, maybe there's clouds, I don't know yet. If there were clouds, the clouds would have to hit the scene, maybe something like this, and then crawl up towards the mountain. That could be a solution for that. And then maybe they come through here behind the mountain. So now cloud would be brighter, and then we'll see how this looks. Could be, so I don't like this immediately. I don't like this. I would maybe like it better like so. Now I have to counter paint. Well, yeah, it could be like this. Let's leave it. We can always change. You see how fast this went? That's now a decision that is very easy to change. So the mountain, a little bit more complicated. This was the light plan. It's coming from the back, which means that the majority of this mountain is in the shadow, actually. But that means that there's some rim lighting on this mountain, possibly. So I could say, yeah, okay, it's going to look somewhat like this striving light from the back, and then all of this is in the shadow, and then what I made here is some some lines to remind myself, oh yeah, there could be a structure that is maybe a little bit illuminated from that mountain. And then I will just bring this structure up. So maybe there's some rock formations or something like that. And it's also good sometimes to not be perfect about this, because new stuff will just emerge that you might like it and say, oh, I didn't think of that, but that looks cool. I'm going to keep this. So in this case, I will silhouette, see the mountain a little bit more freely, because I know there's some light hitting, but I'm not entirely sure what that means. But what I do know is that the light comes from the back, so the majority of the mountain in front will be in the shadow. So knowing that, I just make some decisions, and I hope for it to make sense later. I will show you in a second. It's I will keep this. Maybe this is maybe this line is interesting, right? So you can hide a selection. You do that by hitting Control H. The selection is still active, but now it's not so disturbing, the flickering of the line. So I need now the selection, don't be fooled, this is active. I just hit it, right? So now you can see this selection, I painted it in, and then immediately you will get something that either makes sense or doesn't make sense, but I think it makes sense, so it looks okay. I will keep it. Also, you may worry about, you paint this on the same layer, how do you control the contrast? Relax, it's very easy. You can just go back to your levels, and you see those two spikes are your two tones, and you just can control the contrast from here. You want this to be lighter, darker. Well, yeah, it's actually better. I like this more. So okay, yeah, you still have full control. No problem there. So back to the sketch. Then there's the water. Now the water needs a second tone. If the water gets a second tone, that is a little bit more tricky, because there will be ripples on the water, but generally the water will just take all its tones from the surrounding area. So it will just reflect, and it will absorb and reflect light. That's basically all it does. So in this case, there will just be I guess a first shadow pass of these ripples on the water. It will be slightly darker than the rest. And again, what I'm doing is I know that there will be a reflection, and I don't know how it will turn out just yet, but what I do know is that the water does ripples. That means like you can see here, it will leave out areas, and then it will reflect only where like the water surface bends, and then where it bends the other way, it will reflect, for example, the sky. So this here, you don't need to be too perfect with it. We'll do some reflections, and then where there is more mass, there will be more chance of reflecting this mass, and then where there is less, the reflection will break apart, basically. So this is just, I don't know how this will look in a second, but I'm confident that it won't suck too much. So sometimes you just need to make an experiment. But what we're doing is now we're not being geniuses here. We're just making logical decisions. So these reflections will be darker because what it reflects is darker than the water. That's all I need to know. It's not rocket science, right? It's just we make a decision based on what has already manifested on the canvas. So now this will reflect much more, of course. It will be much more like this here, and then reflect the tower maybe like so, and then I can cut away from it basically. And then there is the tree, and then there's the second tower over here. Of course, yeah, I could, this is Photoshop, listen, I could just cut this and flip it and then put it there, but I think that's not very artistic to do, so it's a little bit boring. Maybe we'll just really paint a little bit more. In the end, I think it will look better for it, because you can see when you just flip stuff and you just copy paste stuff, it always has this cheap look to it. So, but we can really help ourselves by just thinking about how this will reflect that building, right? Makes sense. And then this is the highest building, and then it reflect until here, and then make this reflection. And sometimes inside of reflection there's like a stream of water that reflects something slightly different, and then here is a tree coming in, and then we make this reflection. And this is not being perfect, again, it's just doing about the right decision, not being perfect by any means. And you will see, hopefully this will turn out to be fine. And now I'm reminding you, there's also a difference between the reflection and the shadow. The reflection is not the shadow. So now I'm doing the reflection, I'm not doing the shadow, I'm doing the shadow later. So therefore, see, this would be the shadow of this, but the reflection of this, of course, is that, because you're looking straight at it, and it's not, that is not influenced by the light so much. So yeah, the reflection is you have to deal with that in a different way. Reflection is always what is up here is also down here, right? So it's very different from doing a shadow. So this will go like this, and then somewhat like this, and then basically end here, something like that. So see, all of this will be a reflection, but the shadow will only cover part of that reflection later. So it's really not, and I need to break this much more, because I can already tell that this will be maybe too much of a perfect reflection if I don't do that. And you can always add to this or subtract from this, make the guy a reflection. And also, of course, there's the ship. The ship itself also has here is reflection, right? So that was important to me, is why I put it in the sketch even. So be aware of that. I think, yeah. So now let's see, other ship. Somewhat like this, right? And then we cut it a little bit. Must not be perfect, especially the reflection. It doesn't need to be perfect. So I'm hiding the layer again. So now I need something darker than this, but brighter than this, because reflections are never 100% perfect. That means if you reflect a tone, the reflection will not be the same. It will be duller by a good 20% on average. So I cannot just reflect the same tone. I need something brighter that mixes with the brightness of the water. So let's see, right? Does it make sense? Somewhat. It's just a little bit too bright over here. So yeah, this was my selection. I can now give that selection. I will give it up. It's part of the water. Make sure that it's the right surface. So now, without looking at all the rest, you can see that in here it's a little bit too bright. So I will just add here darkness. Add here, and then, but also some reflection turned out pretty interesting. Needs more foundation here. So this is where it gets more artistic, because that's now more of a personal style thing, whether you like these reflections or not. Also, like, since the waves become larger in front, like the breakup should also be larger, technically speaking, which is here it works really good, and then here I might have to correct it a little bit. So there is the tower. It will look somewhat like this maybe, and then the other tower, and then you can always counterpaint this. See, this is really so I want this to make some sense, of course, but I also, what I'm not doing is I'm not now obsessing over this. This is not something that needs to be perfect right now, and I cannot move on unless it is perfect. This is also not a good way of thinking about stuff. Don't obsess. There is a time later when we do this better. So lasso still the best solution for this, by far. So yeah, next is I would have to apply the same thing for that chip, and we already kind of did this with this line, so that helps now a lot. This angle is debatable. We'll see about this in a second. What also is debatable is how much light hits here on top. We'll see. So this structure will self shadow cast onto the wing, for example, maybe like so. And then there will be shadow underneath the wing. And there we have the chance to make some new structures, little structures. But yeah, that more about this later. It's not the time to obsess over details just yet. So now there's something that we could say that there's also some reflection of light from the bottom, therefore some parts of the structure are also lit from the bottom up. So that, I'm not sure about this, but let's try it a little bit. This is clearly also in the shadow mostly. And then there's insertions maybe. And of course this insertion is kind of important. Insertion here, I guess. Could be like the bridge. And then here we'll have illumination. Right, maybe somewhat like that. Small thing, I'm doing it slightly different. All right, so again, shadow needs to be darker than this. How much? I'm not sure. Well, let's see. So now there's a new problem emerged. Haha. You see this? See how this now I drew outside my layer basically. So this is very easy to fix. You just tick this box and you fixate the layer, and this is no longer possible. So that is a very neat feature for this step. So yeah, we did this, and then now the thing, it might look like it makes sense. And as for the details, I think some things are debatable. Maybe some things need to be more or less, but yeah, it's about okay for now. So the thing that is left is, of course, the buildings. Do it also for those. Maybe now I can like get my thoughts from a moment ago back, and then see what the plan was here. So this could be sometimes a good idea to bring this up. If you made it, and I strongly recommend you do it, because yeah, as you can see, it's some thoughts I just put into these red lines before, and now I'm just basically putting it down the way I thought earlier that it makes sense. So yeah, this will be in the shadow, be in the shadow, be in the shadow. A lot of stuff now is in the shadow, and this is because the light is coming from the back rather than from the front. From the front, everything would be kind of illuminated. I don't like this too much. I like a side lighting or a backlighting for a lot of scenes. I do. And this what it means is that all around stuff basically will come together pretty much like this. So this is pretty much almost all in the shadow. Those angled structures, I'm not putting them in the shadow just yet, because I feel that is too much shadow, because there will still be light coming onto this roof even though it has an angle, but I don't want to just make it dark right away. These antennas or whatever. And sometimes it's just good to do a little bit, just some darker stuff that maybe later you will decide what it actually is. So yeah, this I'll leave it. And then here, of course, windows, insertions, all of that stuff is going to also be somewhat in the shadow. Trees shadow, yeah, you don't have to be very accurate because it's a structure that you cannot really understand it easily. It could have all kinds of shapes, right? So it's not so necessary that you get. It's impossible to control whether you did the trees perfectly or not. Excuse me. So it just needs to be about right. So same for this. Same for this. But you will see in a second that this, maybe this is a statue. And then here comes a lot of darkness on this scene. I think, yeah. Maybe here you can see some. Maybe there's an even darker pass on the trees later. Excuse me. Well, for with a second tone, because of course this is just the first dark tone that we apply here in this scene. So we need more to come. But at one point this will no longer work like this. We have to really paint a lot more, right? So there's some trees and some tree trunks and some branches. Yeah. And then all of this, I'll leave it for now in the shadow, I guess. With the exception maybe of this. This is an edge that you can see. That would be maybe illuminated. Maybe like so. And then here same thing. Most of this is in the dark because, yeah, it's just that angle. This is illuminated and then goes on to be dark. Yeah, we'll see how it looks in a second. And then with this we can pretty much I mean, we could almost start with everything being dark, because that has now just the light from down there and the back that will just pass over this scene just slightly, and then the rest it will leave it all in darkness. So from here everything pretty much, the roof not so much, but then maybe there's a part of the roof here that you can see. And all of this. All of this is where it gets, you will see it in a second, it gets more painterly. This is all dark. And then maybe you can see some of this tree illuminated again, because it has some distance to the structure behind it. But we'll see. We'll see if it works, how it works. So I tend to just do it like this. Maybe there's some illumination going on behind there. Yeah. So let's see how it looks. So now we have to tune this again. We need a much darker tone. I'm hiding this layer, but you can see what happens here. Yeah, again, I made a mistake of not locking this layer's transparency. Of course, that is a bad idea, because then I have to draw stuff again, which obviously you don't want. So now you can see that this shadow pass doesn't make sense. Yes, pretty much. There's some details that I need to fix, but I can also do this off camera. This was in the... So, but what you can see is that we went from pretty much nothing, just a sketch, to just to remind you, we had this before, right? So from this, in part 1, we went to this, which is, you could argue, already more or less a working image, right? You can see it, understand it. So this is the foundation of the image, and I'll be picking up in the next part from here. So next time I'll show you how to further develop this in grayscale, and then we inject color, and then I think on a third part we'll do the detail painting, the atmospherics, the effects, all of that stuff. So yeah, stay tuned for that. I'm planning to do this inside like once a week. Would make sense. So I'm guessing this tutorial will be 3 parts, 3 or 4 for now. This was already much longer than I expected, but if you talk about everything, you will quickly find out that you take much more time. So guys, thanks for watching part 1 of this tutorial. I will be back I think next week with part 2. If you have any questions, put it in the comments. If you want to check out my Instagram, go down below, find it in the description. And yeah, hope to see you next time when I talk more in depth about layers, how to refine grayscale imagery, and then how to use clipping masks, how to inject color into an image. Yeah, so take care.